aspects of this topic, and so my experience as a Quaker minister chaplain and my experience of having levels and circles of accountability, hopefully maybe my story can spark more interest, more discussion, more awareness of how friends can use a tool like a clearness committee or something hybrid of that to support our ministries. So I thought what I'd just do is, because members of my meeting, 2 members of my meeting are here, so I appreciate their kind of being a spiritual nurture committee in absentia this afternoon. Read to you just for you the minute of recording my ministry that came out of Yardley monthly meeting. I hang this on my wall by my desk in my office, so I see it daily, and many people who come into my office, my trainees and others, see it too. So it's a minute regarding the recording and ministry of Tedford Taylor. Through a careful process of discernment, the Yardley monthly meeting has come to unity in the recording of the healing ministry of its member, Tedford Taylor, in the Religious Society of Friends. Ted's gifts of ministry have been recognized and named. His generosity of time and personal energy, his kindness, patience, humility, his listening skills, and his personal leading to pursue a healing profession have all been noted by meeting members. In his choice of profession of chaplaincy and his personal life, he is deeply centered and grounded in the Spirit. We perceive that his primary ministry is in the wider world, as he serves as a channel through which the inward Christ may comfort, console, encourage, and heal those who are suffering. Ted has grown in his spiritual life as he has continued his education and training, taken leadership roles in the meeting in the areas of adult religious education, clerkship of worship and ministry committee, and recording clerk of meeting. As Ted goes out into the world of work, teaching, and conference participation, we feel that he is a fitting representative of Yardley Meeting and the Religious Society of Friends. With the recording of Ted's ministry, Yardley Monthly Meeting accepts its responsibility to support his ministry through an ongoing eldering and counseling process, through such formal minutes as may be required by outside agencies to certify his standing, provide reasonable financial support for travel and other expenses related to his ministry. This was approved by Yardley Meeting on April 13th, 2008. And I have it signed, even though it's not a marriage certificate, I have it signed by many members of the meeting. So I just share this as a way of kind of, yeah, thanks. Maybe it's interesting how it connected to things we've been talking about already today of our giftedness and of a process of discernment to come to a place of recognizing and then supporting our ministries. So a little bit about how I got to that place in 2008 and how I got to here is I did not grow up as a friend. I grew up as a Southern Baptist kid who was so Southern Baptist. I thought you were crying for me. I'm sorry. I know. So Southern Baptist, I actually attended Southern Baptist Seminary. And my first foray into ministry was as a pastor at the United Methodist Church. So I was a parish minister for 3 years, but actually never ordained in that ministry because even at that point I had this sense that who am I to be seen as holier than anyone else or more unique than anyone else. I just felt like I had leadership abilities, but maybe not ordination as an identity. So anyway, that professional history from being a parish minister, left that and went into nonprofit executive leadership for many years and got called back into ministry in a kind of a strange way, but that ministry at that point was in hospice chaplaincy. And so for 5 years I served as the manager of a hospice chaplaincy program in South Jersey, and really at that point grew into an awareness of myself in that ministry through clinical pastoral education, training program that I entered into, did work here in University of Pennsylvania for several years in my training, and eventually was hired as the Director of Pastoral Care and Training at a hospital in right outside of Trenton, New Jersey. So I worked for the Robert Wood Johnson Hospital in Hamilton, which is now part of the RWJ Barnabas system. So I'm interestingly embedded into corporate healthcare and try to also represent something that's very anti-establishment as a Quaker. So through all of that, there's been a process, like as we talked about, of discernment. And I have these, I actually see them as circles of accountability. One of the reasons that I've kind of asked to speak a little earlier and need to leave here at 1:30 is another one of my circles of accountability that I hold on to very dearly is meeting this afternoon in my home at 3 o'clock. I'm part of a dream group that we've been working on doing dream work for about 14 years now together. Wow. So it would be important for me to be there. So I appreciate friends releasing me into that ministry so I can be part of my dream group. But other circles of accountability beyond that have included, I guess, a professional circle of accountability to a advisory committee at the hospital. So in the work that I do there, I have built a circle around me that includes others who work for the hospital, nurses, administrators, physicians, as well as other clergy in the community, and a member of my spiritual nurture committee at Yardley Meeting is part of this professional advisory committee. They meet with the trainees I work with, they hear what I'm doing, help advise me in the process of my work at the hospital. So that's a fairly particular focus of that circle. Another circle that I have in a professional sense is part of my professional accreditation. So in chaplaincy there is levels of accreditation. So I am board certified in my clinical chaplaincy. I'm certified as a hospice and palliative care professional, and also certified in teaching pastoral education as what's called a diplomate in pastoral supervision. So to do all that in the organization that I'm in, we focus our work in small groups called chapters. And that chapter is covenanted to me to nurture me in my professional work, and also my personal work. So we're a small group of 8 that meet regularly to nurture our work together. And actually, I've convinced them to have our annual retreat at Pendle Hill for the last couple of years. So I'm Quakerizing them as much as I can. So that's one other group that I meet with. I'll be seeing them next weekend for retreat. It's kind of interesting how all these groups are kind of in these next 7-8 days are going to be part of my life. The group that I was going to talk to you about, I think more importantly, and maybe gather questions or have dialogue around, is the group there at Yardley Meeting, which we call ourselves my spiritual nurture committee. And so since the recording of my ministry, and I think even before, as part of the process of getting to being recorded, a group of dear friends have kind of walked me through this process. We didn't have the clarity of the clearness processes we just practiced, but we did our best in helping me come to clearness, not about my ministry. I already was in ministry. I mean, I was doing this. I was already working for the hospital at that point. What I and the community at that point were trying to work on is recording a ministry. And since that is not usually done, or you've done as often for around Philadelphia friends, that needed some consideration. I needed to consider, why would I seek such a thing? There were several in our community who said, well, why not? Let's just do it. You know, he's doing the work, you know, and I think at times I was the one putting the brake on, saying, I think we really need to consider this, friends. This is something big for us if we are actually recording and supporting me in this way. And I also harken back to the very first clearness committee that I worked with at Yardley Meeting, which was for my membership, as we talked about. And in that meeting, I think what made me say this is going to be my home is that my clearness committee made sure that they focused on the fact that I was not joining as a member to necessarily bring everything I had to the meeting. They saw this as my membership in that meeting as a covenantal relationship where they were there to support me in my ministry. Already that was the language that was being used at Yardley. So it wasn't too hard a couple of years later for me to invite the Worship and Ministry Committee to consider what it might mean to record my ministry into the wider world. And once we came to some clearness as a committee that was the path that felt Spirit-led, the rest of the meeting affirmed that very joyfully as rightly ordered and the way that they wanted to support me. So I've always approached my ministry, approached my chaplaincy, approached my work in the world as being sent by Yardley Meeting at this point. So I report on a monthly basis to a spiritual nurture committee. Part of the work that we do is reporting out, I kind of tell them what's going on, what my plans are, how things are going. But typically that's a short amount of that monthly meeting time, support committee time. Most of it is really checking on the condition of my soul and seeing where I am and how I am. And helping me consider the decisions that I'm making and the path that is being laid out in front of me and helping me be wise and Spirit-led in that. So I was asked to maybe consider a place where, at least one instance, where there was something that was being suggested, I guess, for me, and how that committee helped. A colleague of mine in my wider professional certifying body, the College of Pastoral Supervision and Psychotherapy, one of the former president of the organization was retiring from his position as the head of chaplaincy and bioethics at a hospital system in Maryland. And he called me and said, I want you to have the job. I think you would be the person to take on this job. And ego went, woo, this sounds great, to both to be stroked by someone I admired and to take on, I guess, a career move up, and to take on a job that would also include some teaching at the medical school and some work in a place I hadn't worked. And so I think with joy, I offered this and shared this to my spiritual nurture committee, where we entered into some silence right after that, because I think they could tell that hadn't been really fully considered. Where I was coming from was more of a surface level engagement with the opportunity, and they invited me to look deeper into what was encouraging me to be there. And it was discerned that it was a wonderful opportunity in some ways, but had I discerned what this would mean for my family, had I discerned what this would mean for the people I've worked with, my other connections, my other relationships. And also, what was underneath my jumping at this opportunity for a mentor to tell me I was loved, I was needed. Where was I in understanding my own sense of worth and my own sense of God's love for me? So worked through that and was quickly turned on that path to say I can see the temptation, and yet I understand that my true leading is not to Southern Maryland, but to be here for now. The other thing that my spiritual nurture committee does, and my husband helps me with this a lot too, I'll start taking on things that's just a natural part of who I am, is I add on things that I love to do until all of a sudden I can't do many of them or can't do them very well. Mm-hmm. And so part of my practice, I'm trying still, is to bring those to my spiritual nurture committee to consider first. And when I don't do that, Kevin is very good at telling me. That's another circle of my spiritual nurture. My husband Kevin says, did you bring that to your nurture committee? Why the hell are you doing that? I said, oh, you're right. We didn't consider that. So I guess in a nutshell, friends, I mean, I was trying to be brief in giving that little story just so we could maybe have some dialogue on either your questions for me of how this has worked or your own experiences, and maybe we could share those.
Well, I have a comment and a question. Almost every time I've been on somebody's support committee, it has been a process of pruning. You know, they think they ought to do more to save the whole world, and it focuses down. My question is more of the mechanics of your committee. How was it appointed? Is there turnover on it? How many years have you been meeting with it?
So I've been meeting with my committee since my recording, so I guess 2008. So it'll be 7, 8 years now. Yeah, 8 years. We meet, so this is one of the, it's interesting evolution in my relationship with my committee. For the first several years, we met probably every other month. So it was pretty regular. It was a group of mostly from Yardley Meeting. Mickey Edgerton, some of you may know Mickey, very involved friend in many places. I met at Quakers in Pastoral Care and Counseling conference several years ago and quickly became a spiritual friend, and so I invited her to be kind of an outside consultant, but outside member of the committee. For the most part, that committee has stayed the same in membership. Several people have either left, one person's left Yardley Meeting, another tries to get there as he can, but is not always able to. But it's a committee of typically 4 to 5 individuals who've been with me through that. As I was saying, my first experience of that committee met every other month or so, and I was usually hesitant to engage the committee. I found it strange that I needed to call them in, so it was my responsibility to make sure, okay, we're meeting. And then I felt strange that I should be the focus of so much attention and love. So I was like, I don't deserve this, why are we doing this? And we talked through that for several years. Much better. Until I finally kind of clicked and said, I guess I am worth this attention and love. And when I finally was hearing from the committee that they drew so much out of that process, that for them, there was joy and love in supporting me. And that for them, it was something that was value time. So I have rested now into an easiness about calling them to help me and about keeping us pretty diligent about keeping a monthly schedule now. So it's on our calendars. The first Sunday of every month is for me, and I get an hour of their time. We meet before worship for now.
In my meeting, the meeting came to clarity about creating a minute of religious service, but our meeting, I placed a time limit on it. It was to be, the clarity was to be revisited, and I noticed you didn't have a date. There wasn't a time limit. It wasn't that the meeting needed to re-examine it.
Yeah, I hadn't considered that.
Well, for good reason, but I think, and I'm just aware of how my meeting was, I think, familiar with minuting someone who's going on a journey, and that it's a time-limited thing, and the person reports back and returns the minute. And so, I guess, there's no question here. I guess I'm questioning my meetings process is what or envying your meeting. I'm aware too of having the meeting commit resources, and we were blessed where many of us had asked for a minute and support, spiritual support, and the meeting had a fear of meeting all these, what if everyone wanted one?
Yeah.
So if I might say that meeting support is going to be our next topic, and our topic now is spiritual accountability and support. And are there particular questions of Ted, who needs to leave shortly?
Yes, I actually just to build on, you meet monthly, and then how often does your meeting get a report about your ministry that is supported from, does that group report, do you report, how does that work?
Here, I'm about to say I should, so I try not to should on myself that much, but I was just about to say I should be probably reporting on a more formal basis. It's less formal than that. I think it feels like because I'm connected on this monthly basis on what's going on, I don't necessarily report out to the full meeting. I have had opportunities during meeting for business to give report, and I typically invite meeting to support me in attending Quakers and Pastoral Care and Counseling. So there is financial accountability that they have for me, and then I feel a strong desire to report back once I return on how that journey has gone. But as far as, I think that you raise a point that I've thought about at times, is there could be, not should, but there could be opportunities to be more forthcoming about the things that are going on with the wider community. You were one of the wider community.
Well, I was just going to share that my perspective from the meeting that we do here. Maybe it's not on a formal schedule, but I feel like we're in relationship, and I feel a sense as a member of the meeting of knowing what's happening with you and that you're cared for, and there's a lot more of that happening through this process of having a spiritual accountability group than happens, if in the absence of that. I mean, I think it's a really good example of how that can work, and it's inspiring for others in the meeting as well to think about that.
Yeah, I was just thinking, one of the ways that I think my ministry connects in with the wider meeting is even through worship. I know sometimes I have vocal ministry that rises that comes out of my ministry in my chaplaincy. And I do feel like there is something that does need to be offered, that God is speaking through that, and that there is some resonance afterwards. So I don't know if that's your experience, but that's my experience as well, sometimes giving ministry.
You mentioned that your different circles of accountability help you say no to doing too many things.
They try to.
How do they help you sort of go deeper or take more risks to be as faithful as you can?
So some of those accountability circles tend to be more supportive in that kind of just be careful with your time, so their time management oversight. My spiritual nurture committee, and I think friend Mickey is really good at this, is to invite where's truth in this. So she will just, if you know her, she won't BS you. She'll just go right there and say, so where is truth in this for you, Ted? Where do you see truth? And that has been for the last couple of years one of my considerations. Is this truth for me? Is this how I experience? And that has helped kind of winnow out the stuff. My dream group is really helpful, I think, at helping me illuminate the unconscious, which is one other way of God speaking to me.
You may have just answered this question,
Mhm.
but I've been wondering, is it a general accountability and trust of your calling, or do you actually set goals that you want to be held accountable to, like shorter term goals, or smaller within larger things, like this year I want to do 16 trainings.
I feel like I work in a corporate setting, and I feel like, that's part of working with my boss. Listing my goals for the year and showing some evidence-based methodology, and then and I don't really go down that path with my other accountability groups. With my corporate boss, kind of, yeah. So these other accountability circles feel a little bit more loose and not in structure.
Ted, maybe it's time too for us to just say our names out too. I'm Clem Gergelman, because I want you to know me just as you made yourself known. I'm very impressed with your saying that all these different forms of ministry and circles that you take them all back to your meeting, that you see that you're this might not be, but you're representing your meeting in all these ways of ministry, right? That's how I understand all my reading of Quakerism, right? That's the way it was supposed to be. The last meeting I was in, people love to be able to identify themselves as being from this inner city meeting, right, with all the diversity and whatnot for things that they were doing, but they never brought any of those things that they were doing to the meeting, to have it under care of meeting. So it was using the meeting's name and its location, but not bringing anything of what they were doing, their ministry, to the meeting. So nor was there anything of what you're talking about in the way of spiritual nurturing committee, that sort of thing. This is what I want to broach. We're in a day and age where there is all this compartmentalization, right? I feel a great call to ministry, but I don't have a significant other who's really keen about me doing things not for pay. Would much prefer me to get the job or the second job or whatever, that would, so, and I understand that I have an obligation to her, especially I'm under her roof, it's her house. It's basically her bills that come in, that sort of thing. So, I hope Kevin is supportive of this, as you've named him, and so that's one thing. Then, I think of, doing things outside of my meeting, and how much, can I or should I be responsible to my meeting for the things that I am doing outside of the meeting? But would love to be able to say, as you're saying, that I'm doing all as a representative of my meeting. I'm doing all these things and involved in all these things with sanction and approbation and support from my meeting.
It's an interesting balance, at least in the chaplaincy world. For most of us with board certification, there is a requirement to have endorsement and ordination. And so if you're in a religious organization that doesn't ordain, to have some type of special recognition that you are in ministry. So, yes, it's interesting that I am a hireling minister in that I get paid, I would say a good salary by the hospital. But I go there and work there as a Quaker minister. And yet, I also am there for everyone. And so there's so many hats that I do wear, and hopefully I balance them pretty well, but depending on where I am and who I am, I represent myself in different ways. And I think that's really interesting you're saying that part of that is representing the Yardley monthly meeting. And like I said, it is important to me that that minute is there in front of me every day as part of my identity, along with all these other pieces of my identity that hang on the wall, including pictures of my family. I will have to say that, for my colleagues in chaplaincy, they are jealous of the support that I have and the nurture that I have. So, and I'm talking about, the Catholic and Presbyterian, but all of the other folks out of other traditions just don't have this ability to, or easy ability to have that type of nurture from their community of faith.
That's actually a good segue to my question. I'm jealous of the support that you have. So what's rattling around in my head is like, so for whom does it make sense to have a spiritual accountability committee? Shouldn't all of us have access to such? Do we have the resources for everyone to have access to such? I think there are some people who have the, I'll call it assertiveness, for lack of a better term, to ask for it, and some people who have just as valid callings who might not think to ask for it. And then there are some people who the community would say, now this person has a calling, and other people who have just as valid callings that the community doesn't think to say that. And then there's just the skills element. So I had at one point asked the meeting that I'm a member of in Maryland for, and I actually asked for a clearness committee, and then it became clear to me, no, I wasn't looking for clearness. I was clear. I needed a support committee. And they said, well, why don't you do a clearness committee first, and we'll see where it goes. And it had to do with professional things, and the committee, they ended up trying to advise me about how to go about a job search. And I said, okay, let's put this on hold for a while.
Yeah.
So there's a kind of what actually is supportive in a spiritual accountability way. So I guess I love the idea of spiritual accountability, and I want actual spiritual accountability to be accessible to everyone who wants it. And it feels, from my experience, like we may be a ways away from that.
I will have to say,
how we can get there.
Yeah, I will have to say, I think I was proactive in all of this. So there was, that's just part of who I am, is like, I think I need this, help me figure out how to get it. And part of it, that was partly spurred by this fact that if I'm going to be board certified as a chaplain, this is what this says I need, so how do I get there? And then kind of understanding it and growing into my awareness of being a friend, that there are these things that we've kind of built into our society that lets us have those things. And so I guess I had to be proactive in putting all these things together. I don't think, Yardley Meeting is an amazing community, but they didn't quite know what to do first either. It took some work. And as I said, it took several years for me to finally even accept what a spiritual nurture committee was, and not just a,
So how did they learn?
Yeah. We just said by doing it. I think, it's just practice. Figuring out what was working and what was not. And when we finally got into a groove of saying, for me to receive support, truly, and for me to understand that that there was joy and love all around this, and that meeting monthly about me and focusing on me was not just helping me, it was helping heal the world. It wasn't just about me, it was helping something else happen. And once that all started to click, but it took us a long time to get there.
Yay, yay.